I've never been in there I've been to meetings, but I've never been in to get my mail. Yeah. Oh, no, I didn't. It's like a storage or now. I can't remember. The confusion for me is that sometimes when we're talking about commercial buildings where we're referencing storage. We did, but it should have been like more like commercial buildings, not storage. That's fine. When I think of storage, I think of storage items. But we were talking about, it was somebody that might, it's more of a commercial building that, yeah. 6:31. It's okay to start on time. Now it's got to be out here a few minutes to 8. Oh, really? Yeah. See, 29 minutes. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay, we're ready when you guys are.
Okay. We'll begin. Welcome to Planning Commission meeting, November 3rd. Glad to see you all here. We will begin with a pledge by Dwight and a prayer by Jeff.
Please follow me in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this opportunity to be here in Planning Commission this night. We're grateful for the blessings and the wonderful community that we live in. We ask for thy blessings to be with us this night, for civility and peace, and for thy spirit to give us guidance as we work through the items in our community. And we're grateful again for those who serve and lead, and ask for thy blessings to be upon this land in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Jeff and Dwight. Right here. Thank you, Jeff and Dwight. All right.
You're welcome.
We need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
Okay. Kenny made the motion and Karen seconded it.
Test.
No, I was wondering, are you the alternate?
I think Heather's actually alternate.
That
Are we
we need to
supposed-
switch places?
You still need to
Can we-
speak in the mic.
Do we need to redo that? Okay. So the agenda has been approved for tonight's meeting. Looks like a good agenda. All right, we need a motion to approve the minutes of our October 20th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Hopefully everybody's read them. Thank you, Marie, for sending them out. Anybody?
Karen Hoyt, I so moved that we adopt the agenda.
And a
We're
second?
on the minutes from last month.
minutes.
Sorry, minutes.
I'll
of the
second it.
October meeting.
All right,
Jeff.
Karen made the motion and Jeff seconded to adopt the minutes of October 20th. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Any follow-up issues on our last meeting, Scott?
No, just let you know. So the city council met last night and they heard 3 items that were recently on your guys' agenda. The first of which was the adjustments to the signage ordinance, and those were adopted by the city council, and they appreciate your time and effort to look through that proposal. And additionally, we had a minor text amendment on the zoning use table to add a city administrative office as a permitted use in the R112 zone. And then there was one other item that didn't come before you. It was an easement vacation, which is a purely legislative decision. So we had a lot up in the Mahogany Ridge area that had an unused easement that was requested to be vacated. So that was heard by the city council, and they found that it wasn't necessary to keep that in place and had it vacated for that particular lot owner. So those are some decisions that don't become before the planning commission, but are somewhat related to land use and planning. So just FYI on that. But no other issues to bring you up to speed on.
Great. Thank you, Scott.
Yep.
I have to tell you, I can't drive down the road now without looking at the signs,
Because you love pole signs.
Yeah,
just pole
today.
signs,
I was-
monument signs, all the things. in
We're gonna
between.
bring back pole signs.
You've
Beautiful
ruined,
poles.
you've ruined my peaceful drive.
They're
through
coming
North
back whether you want them or not.
We're bringing them back.
And I think about Jeff, so. All right, let's move on to agenda number 1. Considering possible recommendation of a concept plan for residential subdivision. Approximately 2100 north, 1700 east, divided into 2 residential lots. It's in the R112 zone. Scott, you want to take us through that one?
Yeah, I'll just hop into the staff report here. You guys should have that in front of you in hard copy if you'd like to follow along.
Hey, fantastic staff report too. Thank
Yeah.
you for
Yeah.
having it out there.
Absolutely.
Getting it out early too. That's great.
Good.
yeah.
Hopefully it's helpful and in the
We're pretty
discussion.
easy to please. You're doing a great job.
Low expectations. No, I appreciate you guys. So as the agenda indicates, this is a concept plan for a 2-lot subdivision. So just to, I guess, set our scope for our action tonight, this is a very first step in a subdivisions process to be approved. This is a recommendation from the planning commission to the city council for concept plan. So looking at this from a somewhat high level perspective, does it meet general zoning? Is there anything that is against the general plan? Some basic consideration. Does it have utility connectivity? Does it have access? So we'll just kind of skip through the staff report here real quick, touch on a couple of items. And happy to answer any questions. We do have our applicant here with us as well, if you guys have questions for them. The applicant is Christopher Taylor. Technically, the parcel is under the ownership of the Rulon J. Gerber Family Trust, or it was as of recently. It may have changed hands, not sure. But this is located at approximately 2100 north and 1700 east. About 1.8 acres being proposed to be divided into 2.9 acre lots. It's located in the R112 zone, so about 1/4 acre is the minimum lot size. So these lots would exceed the zoning minimum for area and width. Jumping through here real quick. Let's see.
Scott, can you get a little closer to your microphone, please?
Yeah, am I still a little bit
Oh,
quiet?
there we go.
There.
Thank you.
I never know how loud those. Yeah, okay. So looking through here, when these types of applications are submitted, it first comes to staffers, so myself in community development, we look at it with our city engineer, public works director, city administrator, and we kind of look at it as an initial check before we bring it to the planning commission. A couple of things that we're looking at. We're looking at a map of the area, a rough layout of where the lots are proposed. The zoning, like we had indicated, these 2 lots will exceed the zoning. Let's skip down a bit here. So when they're submitting for concept, we're looking at water connectivity. This particular location already has a water line in front of it that they will be connecting to. Secondary water is not available given its location east of the canal. So they will be on a second water usage fee tier as they'll be using culinary water. And just so that everybody's aware, when this type of a subdivision is proposed, if there's no secondary water immediately available to them, we do look at the water model, the availability, the anticipated demand, and we determine how much water could be used for external use, if any. So that's a known constraint, given the location. For sewer connection, sewer is actually down the road a ways. The closest connection is on 1600 east, and The westernmost part of this subdivision is about 550 feet away, so it's a little bit further than the mandatory connection distance of 300 feet. So in this type of a situation, the applicant can work with the health department to determine whether or not the soils can percolate sufficiently enough for a septic system. And they do some testing to make that determination. And we do have a feasibility letter that was submitted by the applicant to indicate that it is feasible to have a septic system service these lots. And we can look at that down as an exhibit here in a minute. For roads, as we indicated, this is located on 2100 North. But 2100 North does not connect all the way through, so it is a terminal road or a dead end road now. So the proposal would be to make road improvements along the frontage. With regards to its location, I'm going to open up another tab here so we can look at the location together. Okay. Okay, there we go. Let's zoom in one more. Okay, so this is the subject parcel right here, the parcel ending in 0008. You'll notice that the nearest intersection here, 1600 East, 2100 North. This is where that sewer line is located. The distance between this road and where this property begins is where we had indicated it's about 550 feet. So it's close enough for access sakes. We need to have at least 700 feet or at most 750 feet of distance from the nearest connection point, which this subdivision would have. But as far as the road is concerned, 2100 North is wide enough until it gets to this bridge over the canal. As we looked at this initially as staff, we actually had our engineer go and look at the bridge to make sure that it was able to sustain residential traffic loads as far as weight is concerned. This bridge has been used by the gravel extraction and the gravel pit further to the east. So obviously it's been carrying heavy loads for a while. What it does have an issue with is its width. As we initially thought that, if it can hold residential loads, it's probably fine. But as we looked a little bit deeper into our standards, the technical manual for development for the city indicates that a 20-foot wide road is adequate up to 550 feet. If the road exceeds 550 feet in length, it needs to be a minimum of 26 feet wide. So as it sits today, the bridge is 20 feet wide. We'll need to widen that bridge to 26 to meet that minimum. Now, as we're looking at this from a concept level, we know that that's an improvement that would be necessary before we move forward with building permits, but it can be done as we go through to the development plan, preliminary plat, before we, fully approve this subdivision. So you'll see that that's a recommendation in the staff report. But
And who would pay the cost for the expansion of the bridge?
So that would be on the developer to do that, that improvement. Okay. So that's how that particular parcel, these two new lots would be accessed off of 2100. Obviously, the frontage would need to be improved to our half width standard along its frontage as well. I must zoom out here. Street lighting is technically required of any new development in the city. And so this is just a quick note to bring this onto everybody's radar. We'll look at this when the development plan is submitted to the city to make sure that streetlights are installed with all the rest of the improvements that are typically required. Garbage disposal, as you'll notice, with this being a terminal street, 2100 North, a garbage truck can make its way down, but would have a difficult time turning around. And so as far as garbage disposal is concerned, there would need to be a turnaround to accommodate that. In initial discussions with the applicant, we wondered if the fire marshal would be okay with not having a turnaround, given the distance not exceeding, it's not that far from the intersection, and it's not too far to be able to back it up. And initially the fire marshal was like, that's probably okay. We can always go up and turn around up here further to the east. But as this is private property, it's hard for us to tell the emergency services that they have free access to turn around on private property. So we also look to see the technical manual does require a turnaround. So that's a condition you'll see in the staff report, which will be helpful for the garbage disposal to get themselves turned around as well. A little bit more as far as the plans that are technically required or something that we would want to at least look at before moving forward past concept. Let me see if I can scroll this up a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more legible. So in the ordinance, there's a list of studies and we can determine whether or not they're applicable or not. As staff looked at this, we don't believe a soils report is necessary. There's not a geology report necessary given the flat nature of this area. We do need to see a grading and drainage plan, which I'll go into a little bit more detail here in a minute. A water conservation plan is typically required of all developments, so we'll need to have one of those. A non-buildable area or a common space vegetation plan. Now this particular subdivision doesn't have any common area. There's no HOA, there's no open space that is proposed. So that's not what we're looking for here. As far as the non-buildable area is concerned, this particular parcel lies partially in a FEMA flood zone area. This kind of came up a little bit later on in our review as we really started to look at the details. And so this was a little bit new, maybe something that the applicant wasn't aware of until recently. I'm going to show you an exhibit further down in the staff report here that shows this FEMA floodplain area. So I think anybody who knows the history of this area, it probably doesn't flood often, if ever, in your lifetimes, if you've ever noticed or known this to flood. This FEMA area is a zone A, which basically means that there hasn't been a lot of analysis done by FEMA in this area. I view this as somebody has a really wide marker and they're drawing on a map with not very much precision. And they're saying, look, this is a channeled waterway. And there's a potential that it could flood, but they haven't had the time or the resources to go through and do a hydrology study. So the zone A basically means that there's a potential flood hazard, but there's more analysis that's needed to determine exactly where those flood boundaries are. So the city actually has an ordinance that governs development in a flood zone. That ordinance is admittedly out of date. And so we'll need to work with the applicant and our engineer to determine what needs to be submitted as far as additional details on this to make sure we're compliant with whatever the state and federal regulations are. Okay, just an FYI. So when we're talking about the studies we want to see before we move too far forward beyond concept, that's where we flagged this non-buildable area as a potential study that we'd want to see. Okay. Traffic report. We don't feel like the traffic report is necessary. It's just 2 additional residential lots on a standard city street. So there isn't any anticipated excessive traffic impact. Fire protection plan. We don't feel that there's a need for that. And then the lighting plan will come as part of a development plan that's submitted down the road. As far as the development method is proposed, we're looking at just a standard subdivision that meets the standard zoning. Pretty straightforward. No phasing. There's no open space or maintenance needed for common area. No additional maps or narratives are necessary. And the subdivision is proposed to be recorded with a plat, which is the method that is typical for this type of a subdivision. When we look at this for a concept plan, the subdivision ordinance indicates that the planning commission should look at this broadly. So we're looking at, does it meet the general plan? Does it meet the general development criteria? And I think that we can say that it easily can with the conditions that we've laid out in the staff report here. Do you guys have any questions about the proposal or the concept that's being proposed?
I have one question, Scott.
Yep.
So in Exhibit A of the staff report, it does show a future sewer line going up 2100 north.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
I guess I'm wondering, what the timeline would be on that, because I would hate to see this patchwork of septic tanks in an area that will eventually have a sewer line running through there.
Yeah. So our ordinance is specific. If they're not within 300 feet, they don't have to connect.
Okay,
They are beyond that 300-foot mark, so it's kind of up to the applicant if they want to go through the additional expense to run the sewer a longer distance to connect at this time. And they'd have to do a cost benefit analysis of their own to see if it makes sense or not. It can be expensive to put sewer in. But also septic tanks aren't cheap either. And so I think the applicant has looked at those costs and has determined they'd like to go forward with septic.
so that future sewer line on there, is that on the city's plan already, or is that just hypothetically, there might be a sewer line there?
Hypothetically, as more development creeps towards the east, it would make sense that sewer go
Okay.
in for additional development, but it's not a requirement at this time.
So it could be quite.
It could be a time, it could be soon, just kind of depends.
Scott, as a follow-up to that question that Kenny made, would there be issues with when the sewer line goes in, assuming septic system was installed, that was the developer's choice.
Mhm.
Would they be required then, once the sewer system came in proximity of the lots, the two lots, would they be required then to connect with the sewer line?
I don't believe that they are required to. I think that the health department will incentivize them to. If their septic tank fails, they would not be allowed to reinstall a new septic system. They would have to connect at that time. It kind of depends on if they want to connect as well. They obviously can if and when that line goes across their property, but that's governed by the health department, not necessarily our code.
Okay, follow up on, I just have two other points if I could. The turnaround you mentioned, what fire department was okay with no designated turnaround, and sanitation was okay with no turnaround? What's
So we don't necessarily call the sanitation folks to ask them if they're okay with that one or not. But the fire marshal did issue a letter saying that he was okay without a turnaround. And we looked at that, we said, okay, they probably are okay if that's what they indicate. Additional review shows that regardless of the fire code, our technical manual still requires it regardless. So we looked at that, we said, okay, well, if the fire department's okay without it, then that's probably okay, until we saw, actually it is needed based on this standard. That can take any number of forms. It could have, like a cul-de-sac type of a turnaround. They could have a hammerhead. There's a couple of different options that they could go with. But that's a condition that's listed in the staff report to meet the technical manual requirement.
all right? Last question I have is any issues with canal company in proximity, easements or anything that has to be navigated or negotiated?
Yeah, nothing needs to be negotiated with the canal company per se, but there is, and I think this is mentioned in the staff report as well. There is an easement that is required of all subdivisions that are adjacent to a canal. It's a 15-foot wide access, maintenance, and recreation easement. So on this west side here, that will be shown on the plat once we get to that point. But that would allow for a trail, that would allow for maintenance and access in the long term. What we're trying to do is to make sure we can maintain it, but also as development occurs along canals, we want to make sure we can piece together trail segments. As it's hard to do that unless you get it during a development proposal when we can exact that requirement.
Thank you.
Scott, I've got a question, and that is, are they, and this is probably my bad hearing, they are required to put an asphalt road up to the east side of that subdivision?
So no, they will be required to widen the bridge to be 26 feet wide, and then they will need to improve the frontage of their lots in the subdivision to our half-foot standard. So they won't have to do any improvements west of the bridge. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what about east of the bridge, though, up past,
East of the bridge along their frontage, they will.
put an asphalt road in there?
That's right. Mhm.
And curb and gutter.
Curb gutter sidewalk to our standard.
My, my problem with that is not putting sewer in there. You just get the sewer in there, or you get that build up, then all of a sudden you come back and dig up the road and put a sewer line in.
Yeah.
I would recommend we put a sewer line in first.
The road already exists. We're gonna ask that they're gonna need to improve into their property, into that easement, but the road already exists up there.
I know,
They
but
just have to
is the
do curb and
road
gutter.
It's
asphalt now?
paved, yes.
They would just
Okay.
have to do the curb
Even
and
more
gutter.
so then.
So there are some improvements, and you're right. We probably will have to dig it up when a sewer line goes through. Yep.
So I have a question along with that. So we're designating this a fire access road.
Mhm.
So 26-foot requirement.
Right.
They'll utilize the easement, the 13-foot easement for curb, gutter, sidewalk, and finish that side.
Mhm.
At some point, obviously, there's going to be development east and south of this and north all around it.
Right.
Which will require more than a fire access road. We'll need to have then a 65-foot road.
Right. I think we should be clear. This is not going to be a fire access
Okay,
road.
so
It'll
that's
meet
what-
those standards. It'll be a half width. city
Okay, that's
standard
that's
road.
what I want to make sure we're clear on.
Yeah.
But the easements and the widths and that are all taken into consideration that it can be at some point. This will have the half a road in on that north side.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah. And then when more development comes in, let's say on the south, that will
Yeah.
complete that half width to a full standard.
Where there's the 15-foot easement, are they required to put curb and gutter and stuff right there in front of that if it's supposed to be left?
Not along the canal.
Are you saying like
Untouched.
right here?
Yeah, they wouldn't have to put stuff there, right? Or
We would
they?
have to look, so they'll be
there'd
providing a
be
more
the-
detailed plan with the development plan. That's the next step after concept, where we'll see the actual detail of where everything will go, and we'll have our engineer take a look. I don't think that we are asking at this moment that that we improve a full trail to nowhere, but that we have the easement that is provided. But are you asking, Commissioner, about just curb, gutter, sidewalk for maybe these 10 to 15 feet right here?
Yeah, I was just making sure I just wouldn't want them to have to pay for that too, if they're having that space. So I'm assuming no.
That's a
Maybe
good
it's a
comment.
really dumb question.
No, I think,
I just wanted to make sure there wasn't that.
Yeah.
If they need to have that access and then.
yeah, and we'll definitely look at that in more
So they
detail.
wouldn't have to pay
Mhm.
for that if it needs to be available.
I don't know I know that on current canal, setbacks, a lot of them are curb and gutter there also. So I don't know what
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was
mean,
curious about that.
Theoretically, what we're looking at is, let me see, get back to. Did I close out our map? No, we didn't. Okay. So at some point, there'll be curb, gutter, sidewalk on both sides of the road. It'll be a while before that will occur. But when this bridge is improved, curb, gutter, sidewalk will come up to the bridge, and then we'll have to find a way to traverse it. But the idea being we'll have an east-west trail, well, I should say sidewalk, that goes on the full side of the road.
Is the gravel pit still active?
It is,
And who's the owner?
and I don't know that. Let's see. Canyon Gate subdivision.
Are the owners?
I was just looking at this on the parcel viewer earlier today and I thought it said someone different.
Crystal
Like,
Springs
yeah.
Land and Cattle
Oh, Crystal
Company.
Spring. Yeah, that was what it was. Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
the same thing?
It's a proposed subdivision.
Started Canyon.
I wonder if there's a possibility of participation there with the road.
Yeah, it's not.
Thank you.
So I just want to make sure with the bridge and the road and the fire, the technical code, that they understand that that needs to happen. That's been a touchy subject in the past.
Yeah, and these are things that are listed in the staff report. We'll have to talk about a little bit more in detail with the applicant as we go to the next step, putting an actual development plan together and looking at the technical details of it. But Some of these things may be actually somewhat new to the applicant as far as the FEMA floodplain and the widening of the bridge. We haven't really looked at that in detail with them up until now. But as we look at this from a concept standpoint, then we really start to dig into the code, dig into the weeds and say, okay, what all here could be or needs to be looked at? And that's where we found that it was in the floodplain. That's where we found that the road was longer than that 500 feet. So it needed to be widened to 26 feet in width instead of just 20. So these things kind of come up as you review in more detail, and you continue more detailed review as you go through.
Okay. Any other questions? So we need to make a recommendation one way or the other to send this on.
As a concept plan.
That's a concept plan. So I need a motion, or what do you think? Positive, negative?
I think
Oh.
like to speak.
You'd like to say something?
We'd like to,
Sure.
we'd like to hear them.
So first, I appreciate Scott and all his hard work. And
Tell us, excuse me, tell us your name.
sorry, name's Christopher Taylor, applicant there. So appreciate all of his hard work and everything, and we've gone through this for literally the last several years, trying to get to this point. The bridge has been discussed in the past. We had a meeting with them several times. The first meeting wasn't discussed at all. This was prior, Scott. I get that. But then this last meeting we just recently have that made us move on. We also discussed this bridge. And we were told at that time that it would probably not be needed, where it falls within that. The Utah code does state that there is a rough proportionality for a developer when it comes to costs. That, and as you can see, a 2-lot, this is literally myself and my sister dividing a piece of land that my grandmother had, not getting, like, it's going for fair market value, not like she was given to us. It was still being purchased from the trust. So there's still expenses going along with that. There'll be the expenses with that frontage. I'm willing to put in a sewage along the front to help, do that. But this bridge will make it so that we are not possible to build. You're asking a developer. I understand it's a subdivision, but it's also a minor subdivision. Once again, the Utah state law says anything under 10 is considered a minor subdivision. And those things are not. Now, I get, if I'm developing 500, 200, I get that. Those are rolled in. That cost is minimal for those people. I mean, for that's kind of where we stand right now as far as all that. I mean, I've got a bunch of information on that, but I think you guys are more than aware of what is required. Like I said, I've talked to the fire marshal. There is a gravel turnaround at the end of the dirt road that is still in the public domain at this time that would be adequate, I feel, for someone to turn around now. There are also 2 homes already up there above that canal that are probably provided with sanitation. There is future plan. The general plan that was just submitted in September indicates that road, the 2100 goes all the way through, connecting into the 1900, as well as a crossroad in the 1800 north going up and across. Now, I understand that is also future plan, but given with what the fire marshal had to say, I understand Scott trying to follow the letter of the law, and I appreciate that, I do, but I also feel like that kind of applies to these major developers who come in. I'm not looking to make money off this by any means. I'm just looking to build a home for my family, hoping to have my sister build next to us, and that's kind of what I have to say, I guess. So if you have any questions, I'm open to questions.
Thank you.
A question, you say there's a turnaround.
So at the end of the road, it kind of turns into the asphalt right there. There's like a little turnaround right there, or it's widened right there. It's a gravel turnaround. If I need to bring in extra gravel to help level that out or whatever, I'm willing to maybe do that. But as far as putting in like a full T, a hammerhead or something, I mean, once again, you're starting to get into these exorbitant costs that I feel are being asked of two. I mean, it even says that anything 10 and below, a plat isn't necessarily net. You can, there are other means to divide that without having to do a full plat.
You're saying that turnaround is on the east side, clear up of that.
So on that east side, right
adjacent
there,
property.
right there where the property kind of ends there. And then-
Your property, the other east
so the
property.
1800. So right here, there's kind of a turnaround. right
Okay.
there, Natural turnaround. It may need to be leveled a little bit and gravelled, but I feel like that would be adequate. There's also a home that is accessed down that 1800, as well as the home right across from the property. And like I said, that 1800 north is on the general plan right now to be brought all the way from 1900 all the way across, and then 2100 all the way up into your Green Canyon Road. And I know that's future state, but I feel like that future, the way this valley is growing and the way the North Logan is growing, I feel like is gonna be here before we know it.
You're saying it's 1800 north. I'm seeing that's
East,
1800
sorry.
east.
I saw the north 1800 east, sorry, excuse me.
Okay.
Scott, I was gonna ask. I worry that we'll reach this stalemate because we were talking about making a positive recommendation to the city council with the one of the caveats being that the developer widens the bridge to 26 feet, but if the developer's saying that's not feasible for them, are we just kicking the can down the road to where we will reach a stalemate at some point? And
So
Yeah.
Yes.
So we just went through this of half mile north. And the code's the code. And there isn't, as our body is strictly to look at this and recognize, how does this fit into the code? We don't have the ability to waive the code because it's only 2 lots. The one that we just had a few months ago was 3 lots. The code's the code. And so our recommendation is really based on, does the proposal meet the code? We don't have the ability for the subjectivity or waiving codes, or we don't think the code should apply because someday this might be one way or the other. It really just comes down to, does it meet the code? Now, if the code needs to change, that's a whole nother thing and a whole nother meeting and a whole nother group of people.
Right.
But for us, it's really about, does this meet the code? And the staff report, I think, outlines, you know, the things that we would see or recognize that would need to be done in order to meet the code. Now, we shut down that proposal of a subdivision because of the width of the road. And it wasn't a stalemate. It didn't meet code. Now, there's solutions to meet code, and sometimes that's expense of widening or doing something like that. But we can't just make exceptions to codes because it's little or it's that requires us to change the code.
yeah,
And so the question really is, does it meet the code? And the proposal that we have in the staff report would meet the code if those changes are made. So, you know, my sense at this point, I don't necessarily have, you know, any other real discussions other than I agree with the recommendations that here. As a body, we would have the opportunity to make that recommendation that would then go for city council to then make their determination based on that. So,
I mean,
And
you could
that-
argue that the road, depending on where you measure it from to the bridge, is less than 500 feet. I mean, if I measure from the front of the bridge to the edge of to where 1600 starts, that's less than 500. Is it barely less than 500? I'll give you that, but it is. And I mean, I guess that gets into some semantics, but I mean, if you measure from one end to but if you measure from the other end to the other end, it all depends.
Well, that goes along with my
Go ahead. No, you're.
my earlier question, because we've dealt with this similar thing before, and as Jeff said, we have to abide by the code. And so I just want you to realize that if we give a positive recommendation to send this on, it is with you fixing the road, the bridge.
Correct.
So you just need to understand that's what's going to happen here. Dwight, did you have something you wanted to say?
Ask if there was any.
Okay. Aaron?
I've got a question, and that is the property east of yours. Is the owner of that property willing to go with you on developing sewer systems and widening that bridge in order to meet the city code that we have now?
Which property, the one directly east or the?
Yes, one directly east.
I don't believe so at this time. We've talked to him and I don't think he has any interest in developing at this time.
Okay. Yeah, or any of the other properties around there.
So,
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, so we're here because
State your name, please.
Nolan Gerber.
Oh,
I
thanks.
am the executor of the Ruling J. Gerber Family Trust, and this is my nephew. Okay, we've owned this property for 60 years, paid taxes for 60 years and got no benefit from it. And so now finally we have a third generation that desires to do something with this property. Now, we wouldn't be before this board if we're not subdividing. Is that correct? If we just take one lot and we say we want to build one house, then it wouldn't even come before this board. Is that correct? Or is that not correct?
So we would have to look at the legality of the lot to see if it meets that definition. But regardless of whether or not it's being subdivided, it still has to be brought up to these standards for road improvements, those types of things. Sewer connectivity, water connectivity, those things would have to be verified before a building permit could be issued.
Okay, perfect. We don't need to go any further because we're not going to widen the road. We can't afford to do that. That's just not a feasible thing. So, and I have a concern and a problem that when we brought this up, they said that the bridge was adequate. It's also in your report there. If you'll read that, the bridge was adequate. So with that, we then spent money to do this sewer study to see if it was feasible to do that. If they would have told us right at the beginning that no, this is not code and you're going to have to widen the road, we wouldn't have spent the money to go and do the sewer thing. That I'm bothered by that if this is a known thing, why do we have, I mean, we go and spend all this money to try and come up to where we can, and now all of a sudden they block it. And that's, you know, that's a problem for me. I don't know whether that's a problem for you, but it's a problem for me.
Understood.
Well, we understand that, and I'm sorry, but we still have to abide
Right.
by what we
I
have.
get that. I get that. But we should then pass that down to whoever moves us to this point and say, if you're not going to change the bridge, then don't pay any more money. Don't do all your tests and all that kind of stuff. So our only choice now is to sell it to a developer to build whatever he wants to build. But thank you for your
Okay.
time.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right.
I guess I'm wondering, has anyone done the analysis to determine a ballpark figure on how much that would cost to widen that bridge?
Yeah.
You guys have,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, I think.
My name is Connie Taylor. I'm part of the trust as well. This is my son Christopher. And we did have it, and the engineer told us $100,000. And that is give or take, depending on how it goes. So they
Yep.
just can't simply afford to. Oh, and then there's also 3 irrigation gates that would have to be moved at that time too. So that would be getting permission from all 3 irrigation on the right and having those moved. Yeah, simply is expensive.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion, commission?
Well, Madam Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, we're ready to make a
Acceptable.
motion.
And I think it's great that appreciate the input and your discussion about plans and discussions with city personnel before. But as been indicated, we have to abide by the codes that exist. Given that, we have before us a responsibility to respond to the agenda item here. So given that, I would like to make a motion that we make a positive recommendation to the city council of a concept, an approval of the concept plan for the residential subdivision of approximately 1.8 acres located at approximately 2100 north and 1700 east. The parcel number ID, you could include that. That it includes the provisions provided by the staff and the staff recommendations, that be a part of the positive recommendation and conditional upon the city and the developer working through all of those recommendations.
Thank you. So we have a motion for a positive recommendation to send this on to the city council, including the recommendations by the staff, to send positive recommendation with the staff. What is the word?
Requirements.
Staff requirements that we need. So we need a second on that.
Jeff seconds it.
All right. So it's been moved by Dwight, second by Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, let's move on to item number 2. Scott?
Okay, let me hop out here.
Stay close to your mic, Scott.
Yep, there we go. Okay, so we wanted to have a work session discussion with everybody. I didn't provide this, in advance because I didn't expect you to read through it per se. But what we want to look at is storage units. The self-storage units you typically are able to rent for about $100 a month or so, and put your personal items in them when you need to have some seasonal storage or what have you. I'm gonna open up another window here and get the map. Okay, I'm gonna open our zoning layer. Okay, what we're looking at is 2 different land uses. So if you look in the land use table, these uses are called large warehouse type storage and small multi-unit storage. I also included on this worksheet that you guys have the definition of accessory storage for multiple family residences, just so we can keep all the storage types in front of us as we talk through this. Okay.
So
Go
as a
ahead.
point of clarification, we're talking about all storage?
We're going to talk about storage in general, where they're allowed to be permitted in the city, and then we'll talk about the types of storage. So,
Because this has been a point of confusion in the past.
sure.
When I think of storage, I think of like storage units,
Mhm.
but there's been some reference to storage amongst the city that have been commercial type mixed use,
Like outdoor, storage yards with equipment.
or even some commercial buildings that have been noted as storage.
Okay.
Like a
So
warehouse.
I just want to make sure I understand what storage we're talking about. And you're fine to give your introduction, but
Sure.
there's been points of confusion about that in the past.
Okay, well, this is a work session, so bring everything to the table that may have been confusing in the past. Let's kind of throw it all out there. What I wanted to primarily talk about in this discussion is the self-storage
Oh.
type. This large warehouse type storage is similar. It's just on a larger scale. So it's like warehousing, basically. But if you look on the map here, particularly towards the west side of town, the darker red is our general commercial. The gray is our heavier commercial. Green is agricultural. And then as you get a little bit further west, we've got city center commercial, which is a smaller scale commercial, more of a not big box, but more like residential commercial. And then the red hashtag is a I forget that. It's CC, city or commercial, something like that. Let me open it up here real quick. It's basically an older version of our general commercial, community commercial is what that one is. So in the use table, so if you look a little bit further down on this notes page you have, this is a truncated version of our land use table, our zoning table. I'll zoom in as much as I can, try to keep it full frame here. So the small multi-unit storage is allowed as part of a mixed use general zone. It's conditionally permitted in the community commercial, the general commercial, and the MC, which is like the manufacturing commercial, heavier commercial. And then the larger warehouse storage is conditional in the general commercial, manufacturing commercials at the larger commercial. And then the M2 is like the tech park, the small little piece of the USU innovation area. It's kind of a unique zone, very small area in our city is zoned M2. But what I wanted to show, so these are where they're currently allowed in our city. So if you look at these, CC, CG, MC, mixed use, general. We go back to the map. Generally speaking, it's the west side of town along Main or down 2500 on either side, first, second, west. Okay. What we're looking at, and I'm sure this has been discussed with you in the past, if it is labeled as conditionally permitted, we are obligated to approve a request if they can show how they are able to mitigate any reasonably anticipated impacts to their neighbors. So with storage units, for example, there's not a lot of noise. There's not a terrible amount of traffic. Really, the only condition that is usually established is a fence screening of some sort. And that's about it. Most of these, maybe we have some requirements for maybe a paint color so that it blends in a little bit better. But when you think about what conditions would we apply to a storage unit facility, and fencing is just about it. But the biggest thing I wanted to bring up is when we look at our city, along Main, I don't think that storage units necessarily fit on Main Street. And we may have differing opinions on where these things are best suited and where we should accommodate or if we should accommodate them at all. But certainly along Main Street, there would appear that there's a better use for that land, right? One thing that is, I mean, I'm fairly new with the city, right? I grew up here, but
Like storage units.
I'm not privy to all of the conversations that have been had in the past, the visioning that we've had in the past, with the planning commission. But I don't think that storage units meet most people's vision of what our Main Street could or should be. Additionally, 2500 North is somewhat of a gateway into town. And, there's heavy, commercial along 2500, but do we use that land for storage? Maybe, maybe not. The other thing, when you look at our city, we're landlocked. As you guys are well aware, we're bounded by the mountains on the east, the airport on the west, and then 2 municipalities. We don't have a lot of room to grow. So I look at this as a budget. We have a budget of land available. What do we do with our land that is available? Do we let it get developed out with storage units that are, they're needed? A lot of families need a storage unit and they're helpful and handy, but they don't really generate much tax revenue. They don't draw, visitation to our commercial areas, and generally they just take up a lot of space and don't do a lot of good. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts along the contrary on that.
They don't cost us though. For city services, you don't have.
Snowplow.
Let's hear the argument, Alan. We don't have police to have to patrol there. It's not Pioneer Valley Lodge all night long.
Lost opportunity, I guess.
Yeah,
is
I
maybe a
agree.
cost.
But I'm just saying, let's not dismiss it altogether. Just
Sure. I would say
We're
there's
just,
a
we're
need.
just talking about the locations. Not getting rid of them in our city, Jeff.
I know. Well, he just asked what my thoughts were. I was
No,
Are
saying,
they,
I wouldn't just dismiss it because you don't like them.
sure.
are they areas where there does need to be a police presence? Is there break-ins that happen at those things?
I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they've got security cameras and I'm sure that there's issues with, sometimes people choose to live in them, but I guess what my argument is here is it's a lost opportunity cost, right? We have a finite amount of land. What do we use with it? Is it really the highest and best use of our prime commercial area? I would argue that they're needed. You know, it's a commodity that a lot of people would need, especially as you're transitioning. We have students, a lot of student population, but where are they best accommodated? And I would argue probably not where they're currently permitted. So there was a discussion I wanted to have, get your thoughts on that.
So where, Scott, where do you think they would fit better?
That is a very good question. You know, a lot of times storage is, we're trying to find a place where we can tuck it out of sight, out of mind, you know,
Yeah.
not too far away from, you know, where people need them. You don't want to drive an hour to find your storage, right? But if you think about it in a regional term, I mean, North Logan is some of the more expensive real estate in the valley, comparatively speaking, when you look at the valley as a whole, from a residential real estate cost and commercial land values. It's, I would argue regionally, it doesn't necessarily belong right in downtown. Any other thoughts on
I don't
that?
disagree with you, Scott. I'm just gonna just play devil's advocate a little bit. I worry that this might be a slippery slope. You know, one could argue that a car wash probably isn't the best place for downtown either, but we've got a car wash right at the intersection of Main and 2500 North, where you say is our two gateways. So where do you, if it's not storage units, where do you draw the line?
It doesn't.
Yeah, and we could go through the land use table as a whole and we could spend days just arguing about,
Yeah,
does that
yeah.
use belong here? Does
Right.
this use belong there? And it comes
I
down to
think
a
it-
large
part of
vision.
it, I think it's important to that because I'm kind of leaning over here too, that it's hard to come in and dictate what's sexy and what's not.
Mhm.
We know pole signs aren't, and now storage units.
The one.
But the car, I mean, the car wash is a perfect example, and that's a pretty nice looking car wash.
Yeah.
But give it 10
Right now.
years.
Yeah.
So-
There's car lots along there that I think I wish weren't on. So is it? I think I think you have to look bigger than even storage. And what's Main Street compared to the city center? What is the focal point of North Logan? I'm more concerned about Main Street and an economic thing than what we're seeing. And I'd like to protect more of the city center as the city,
We-
you know, the nicer looking whatever, and see Main Street more as just that economic hub.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'm not as, you know, uptight about storage units.
We
or
do
car
have
washes.
regulations for what Main Street landscaping needs to look like. Right?
We do. Yep.
We do.
Frontage requirements. So anybody who develops along Main Street has to come up to that standard. So
Has
there
to-
is an aesthetic, you know, vision that was put into code that we're slowly bringing to fruition, one development decision at a time,
Right.
kind of waiting for those applications to come through. I think what we're trying to do with this discussion is I recognize that we're somewhat beyond our last visioning exercise, as in the general plan was 2013. You know, we're a decade past and we're looking into revising and or updating our general plan, which primarily starts with visioning. What is the vision of the community? And then
Yeah.
we build on that, right? So we know that that's on our horizon as a large project for us to tackle as a planning commission, a city council, as a body of the public, right? But one thing that I was looking at, we have a developer, you may or may not remember this, about a year ago, who came through and got a conditional use permit for 5 acres of storage units on the west side of town. They have not executed on that yet. They technically need to subdivide the property before they can move forward with that conditional use permit. That conditional use permit is set to expire next month because they haven't acted on it and it's been a year. And I can't lie, I was okay with that. It gives us another chance to relook at this area, I know we haven't gone through that general plan visioning exercise in a decade, and we need to do that for sure. But what I would like to do and what I would propose we do is we freeze this particular use as a large gobbling land use for now. Go through that visioning process and determine where we want these things before we allow more development of this particular. I'm sure there's others in the land use code that may not be the best use of that land, but this is a low hanging fruit that I think we could easily address it for now. Even if it is temporary, we can put it back in later if the vision does show that we want this here and we focus more downtown. But I wanted to have your feedback before we went and put a proposal together.
And the idea is just to have more tax revenue,
Higher performing uses.
something there.
Yeah.
Would you freeze that for all three categories of storage too then?
So we would have to look at the large warehouse storage because obviously there's a lot of warehousing out there and it's part of a business operation, not just warehousing.
Yeah.
So for example, we've got Lazy One. They have a lot of warehousing as a part of their business, and we don't want to obviously get in the way of that because it's a crucial component of those types of businesses. But what I was putting out here was everything that was storage related, just so we could get it out on one piece of paper in front of us to see what we're working with. Primarily, I think we need to start with a small multi-unit storage and tackle that and just freeze it. The accessory storage for multiple family residential, that's specific to that type of a product. So if for example, there's a multi-use product that's approved, sometimes they have garages that are separate from the actual residential structure that would meet this definition. And I think that those are okay because they're part of that development and they're adjacent to. But that's, I don't know, I wanted to get you guys' thoughts on that. I know we need to go through a much larger visioning process before we start, changing wholesale things in the land use code. But this is one item I think is something we should look at.
I can see your point, Scott, encouraging, especially on Main Street, businesses that bring in more city revenue. That makes sense to
Mhm.
me.
There's a finite resource of land out there. And then after it's developed, then it becomes a redevelopment game, and redevelopment is much harder. I mean, look at Washington Street in Ogden. Trying to redevelop Washington has taken them decades and decades and decades, and it is very difficult to do. So
if we don't want storage units on Main Street, then we have to go through and change this.
as it
code
sits right now, it is a conditionally permitted use on Main.
anywhere. Yeah,
Mhm. Anywhere in the red that you see there's.
Yeah.
We'd have to approve it if they were to come with an application and show how they can
how they can
reasonably
make it work.
mitigate their impact.
I really like the idea of the visioning thing. I really struggle with making the one-off decisions. You feel strongly about storage and I feel the same way about mixed use.
Mhm.
Yet we're trying to put all of that on commercial land. And it really becomes completely subjective. And I would love to spend some time focusing on that vision. Myself, I have a hard time with the one-off
Right.
stuff.
Yeah,
And-
it's making a decision in a box for sure. Yeah.
Right.
On a micro scale versus looking at it from the
Yeah.
macro scale.
And it might be
So-
helpful to educate us on what those economic driving, what was the term you used? I liked it.
Highest and best use.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, economic impact, maybe, I think understanding that's helpful because that's obviously a concern.
Yeah.
Right.
In making
makes
sure that it is finite. And so that's always been my pushback on changing some of the commercial to mixed use because it is finite.
Mhm.
And but I just feel like we get these questions in a little bit of a silo or a box, and at the end of the day I have some opinions, but I don't know that I really understand where is that high economic impact
Yeah.
and what parts of town do we want to save for that?
One thing that we could do is just to help start wrapping our heads around the general plan process. I don't know were any of you guys here in 2013 when that was last conducted?
Lived here, but not on the
Not in the
commission.
committee.
Okay, it's a large task. I mean, it takes a lot of effort. There are a lot of components. But you always start a general plan with a vision process, lots of public input, a lot of outreach, and you start to craft a vision. One thing that has helped, I think, other communities is you look at your jurisdictional boundaries and you change it from like a map, and you look at it from a budgetary standpoint. How many acres do we have in this zoning district? How many acres do we have in that zoning district? What is our population projection for the next 20 years? How many people more are going to live in our city, and where do we put them if we develop it 1 lot per acre? Or if we, and then we can look at, the tax implications. How much is it? What is the tax burden if we were to develop in this particular style versus a different style? And we can look at, if we were to allow for all of Main Street to develop as large box commercial, what does that look like? Or, so we go through this visioning and scenario building to say, what do we like and why, and what are the implications if we were to move in that direction? So I think that is a large task ahead of us, which will set the table for, more micro decisions later. This is a micro decision without that vision, but I think if we stand from this distance from the map and say, do we want storage units all along Main Street? I think that maybe is easy for us to say. I don't think that that's going to fit any vision that we come up with in the general plan.
But
go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was gonna say, but the problem we don't make decisions that way. We don't say, no, we don't want Main Street full of storage units, but yet we'll have a proposal come before us that's a little micro part of that.
I
that
think
we
you
have-
can.
That's why we're working on this. I mean, this is why
Yeah,
we're bringing this up.
Yeah.
that's what I was
But I think it's
saying.
bigger than storage.
But I
Well, I do
think
too,
what
but-
Scott's saying is if it's going to take us a while to get to that plan.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, if someone comes up and says, I want to put storage units all along Main Street, we would, unless we
we
do something
have to.
now, that will overcome our best intentions on our plan down the road.
It's definitely a Band-Aid. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, does conditional permit, I mean,
It's like the rest
We
of
would
our
have
job.
to-
It follows the rules and we approve it.
We
Yeah.
have to, if they.
We
can
don't have
prove
that
it, they can do
legislative
it.
ability to.
So you're making this recommendation, Scott, but remind us, what is if everyone's in unanimous agreement that we would like to remove that, it still has to go through.
A very
the
public
process.
process. Yeah. So this is just a work session, just get ideas out there and say,
Yeah.
hey, I recognize this could be an issue, and I see that there's an opportunity to at least put a Band-Aid on this for now. And then, we're going to come back with more visioning later for, larger changes that are intended to meet that vision. For now, we would bring this back. It would be a legislative text amendment, public hearing, public input.
Mhm.
So it's not like we're doing this in a vacuum per se. And that public input is intended to get that vision even on a small scale for members of the public who are interested and want to have something to say about it. But for now, I think that this is something we can address in the meantime before we really jump headfirst into the swimming pool that is the general plan process.
In the deep end.
Yeah,
we don't swim. Scott, I've got a question on what kind of wording would we need in order to restrict
Not if we take it out. I'm just saying.
the storage units from on Main Street?
Yeah, it would be a very simple change. Really, it would just be changing these from Cs to just striking it. It just wouldn't be a permitted use anymore.
It's the same. You just say no.
So it would be a text amendment, a red line ordinance that would just strike this use as being conditionally permitted in those zones. So if anybody were to come to us with an application and say, I want to put storage units on Main Street, we would say the zoning doesn't allow it. It would just be non-permitted.
Okay.
So right now, large warehouse storage is permitted in the innovation campus.
It is. Yep.
For now.
So, and
So you would
that's,
want to strike that too.
well, I don't know if that necessarily is that much of a concern. So if you look at the zoning map, the large innovation, this is the only square that I can find on our map that is zoned M2. And it's just a university owned parcel of a part of that innovation campus. So just right here off of 12th East and about 1400 North.
Yeah.
Where's that?
Scott, do you,
Yeah. they're like-
Scott, do you have information on the number of storage units for these three categories, for each of the three categories?
I don't, but I could do some analysis and see if
Yeah.
I can determine how many I think there are.
You bring it up, why next time, let's
Sure.
have that data. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think this is good to work on, Scott, and it's good to make us aware
Is there
and
something that we need to know? Like, is there something you're scared of? happening in the next month?
I'm
Just be
afraid,
level with
I'm
me.
afraid of having an application come through with like 10 to 20 acres of storage units. Maybe it never happens, but if it does, we wouldn't be able to say no.
So, but within the next month, we won't be able to say no right now, right?
If we were to
If they
move
can-
forward with something like this, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think this, in my opinion, I think this is a good Band-Aid to use right now.
What
know,
is though? We
to-
haven't proposed
Well, I
something.
know we have proposed something to think about this and to say, no, we don't want storage units here, here and here.
So
So
To look
basically
at
what
it,
we're,
decide what we don't want.
yeah, basically what we're saying
We
is,
don't want pole signs either.
yeah, basically what we're saying is, Scott, yeah, bring us some recommendations. Yeah, that's what
Yep.
we're saying.
that would be the next step. in
We'll
the
be happy to
process.
consider them. Or turn them down.
It's
Yeah.
just,
No.
it's just like this thing tonight. I mean, I think it's good for us to have some history, just like this other thing that we've had to deal with. Most of you weren't involved in the history of that, and so it's nice to be a little involved in the history. It's nice to know the general plan, and I don't know, Scott, it seems overwhelming actually, doesn't it?
It's, you tackle it one piece at a time.
Yep.
That's how you do
Right.
it.
Eat the elephant.
Yep.
So we're gonna start with storage unit code references.
Well, we'll start on it in earnest with visioning and, putting together some committees and doing some outreach and data
And I
collection.
think we can start with self-storage too.
Right, right. That's good.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, maybe you have something else that you're, I don't know.
As far
bring
as
some
the general plan
recommendations.
is concerned,
It sounds like self-storage on Main Street's the concern,
Yeah.
well,
or in the commercial area.
I will tell you, when I started, the first couple of weeks, I literally just sat and read code, just sat and read and read and read, the general plan. I read all sorts of things just to try to jump in as quick as I could. And I have a list of things that need to be addressed, just small stuff, and we'll just add things in and we'll tackle them one thing at a time that I noticed could be better. But it always starts with a conversation just to see if I'm on the right track or not. And then based on your feedback, we'll go and put together some red lines for further discussion as a proposal. But
I-
this is one thing I saw as
Yeah.
before we have another application come through the door, which we may have, and before, we reapprove a conditional use permit that is soon to expire, maybe let's look at this. And if we're not happy with that, now's the time to address it.
What's
I think
concern
that's
with a
good.
Conditional use permit.
That they'll do
Uh,
something.
They
Well,
can
I know, but what's-
resubmit and be approved.
Because it's
based
not on Main Street.
No,
What
No.
else would we have on that land?
on Main,
No, on the land where that conditional use permit is.
like on Second West.
Yeah,
Like
you know-
Target.
no, I'd rather have storage
I
units in
second the Target.
apartments.
Well, no,
I
I'm
think that
saying-
we've
But
got,
I think what we would
Parking.
like is something to bring more revenue into the city.
I think that
Yes.
there's better opportunities out there.
Yes.
If we were to go fishing, there's probably better fish to be caught.
Well, I think we're on the right track then.
Yeah.
Scott.
Especially with Costco coming in, and you're coming up 2,500, right?
Costco's-
That
Yeah,
right there, that's
25
gonna be, that's hard to develop.
2,500 north is another thing that we'll want to look at from a visioning standpoint for sure.
That's a big.
But
that's a
we
big
only have
prime
Costco,
real
we only
estate.
have a small section.
Scott, next time, could you bring wording that would help?
Yeah.
This kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to just have a general discussion, just a work session, look at where are these things permitted? What is our existing language? And then before we really put pen to paper, get your feedback.
Okay,
Thank you.
I like it.
so,
Okay.
Job.
you'll come up with some suggestions.
Yep.
Then for us.
Yeah,
to
we'll,
work on.
we'll come back next meeting or two and we'll get it taken care of.
Okay.
Okay.
Great, Scott, thank you. Any staff business we need to know?
I kind of have an annoying request. So we have a Christmas party
Wants
coming
us to
up.
do training.
And we've been asked to submit photos of the community development department.
Oh,
Oh, my.
And if you took a photo of my office, it'd be kind of a bleak photo, not very exciting. So I was hoping we could take a group photo as
Oh.
representation of what we do in community development planning. This is obnoxious because I hate photos as much as anybody else does, but I had an idea to maybe stand
not
in
as
front
bad
of
as I
our
was
zoning
fearing.
map.
I know.
oh, are you kidding?
What?
No, photos is, it's miserable. I agree. No one
See?
wants to do it. We,
I know, I'm the ugliest face
Yeah.
here, but
See,
Look
So we want to take one right here.
I've
now?
started that movement.
Let's just do right here now, get it over with.
is that okay?
I believe.
Okay,
I
can we-
feel, you know,
I do need.
Gotta be-
can we do it in
Go
front of
get
the zoning
my hair
map
done,
just
huh?
to?
I'll see if the fire marshal's in it.
Good work.
We need to look official.
I really do have to go though.
Okay, Jeff has to go. So
So take in
let's,
front of the zoning map.
oh, we can't sit here in front of our desk.
Oh, let's act like we're really into it.
I think this is still part of this.
Puppy dog. We're walking.
Let's see, how's it?
Oh, I love it. Seriously. It's only 2 lots.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, this is good. Mm.
Just keep yelling, just keep yelling. It's so mad.
Okay, Scott, good job. Don't
Speaking to the mic.
Don't smile so much.
Speaking to the mic.
Are we done?
Pretend we're having fun.
Yeah.
No,
Do you wanna
let's
do
do
a less?
serious.
Oh, no, that's good.
less like-
Okay. Commissioner business.
Let's just all go, oh, not again. Do
Y'all are very cute.
Oh, thank you.
you want us to smile or frown?
Smile, this is good.
Oh,
Thanks.
That was
Any other business, Scott?
that was almost painless.
Okay.
right.
So RSVP by the 18th of November and the party is when?
December 7th, Wednesday, 6 to 8 at Green Canyon. The common Green Canyon Night Bowl, like we've done in the past.
I hear there's raffle prizes.
What are we eating?
This is December.
What?
Yeah.
So RSVP by the 18th of November, the party's on the 7th of
Leftovers
December.
from school that day.
It's called Cowboy Delight.
We can dig our own out of the garbage can and pick what we want. Is that what you're saying?
7, 6 to 8 is out.
Gotta get
Something
things.
in the evening. I forget the,
It's in the draft.
Marie, what time is it
If you
at?
look at his email, and he's got a link to them.
6 to 8.
Well,
And you can bring a +1 as well.
Okay, I really do need to go.
I don't remember
Okay.
seeing that in my email.
And they need to know
So-
by the 18th.
Thank you.
Yep.
And our next meeting is,
So it'll be so we remember we only have one in December.
but this
Our
next,
next one.
The next one is 17.
See, and I'm hoping we're like the end of November. No.
yeah.
Skipping.
Okay,
weeks.
I will not be here
17th.
on the 17th, so Jeff gets to chair
God.
this
Next
meeting.
meeting's
Okay.
November 17th.
Okay.
And the next one we have
Rezones.
And then
15th. Is that the one in December, right?
December 15th is our only meeting in December.
December.
So when is that? Did you say that there's a party? My hearing is terrible. So
Yep.
I'm just saying
December 7th.
December 7th. That's going to be a problem.
There's an email from Marie too that you'll see.
Okay.
People, I'm not paying attention, talking to Jeff here.
Who's running this?
December 7th. And then Christmas.
Oh, yes, I got that
He just
down.
was- He just didn't hear it, so he.
Oh, okay.
What? I can't hear what?
You're.
Anything else, people? I need to- Oh,
I do have to apologize for my nasty mustache. We're having a competition in the office, so I feel like I have to apologize because I creep people out.
You actually should.
We appreciate the apology. Yeah.
So it'll get nastier. as
We
the
And
were
we'll see.
wondering.
Okay. So December 15th, we'll look forward to.
Yep,
okay.
That's it.
Oh,
This is
One
perfect.
question.
Thanks for the warning. I might be on the 17th.
Oh, sorry, one more.
Oh, what
I'm
more
gonna
thing?
have to
Sorry, one more
I-
thing I wanted to bring up. So as part of the city council's discussion on the signage ordinance, they asked that we put together a committee to talk more broadly about city branding, signage, maybe more adjustments to the signage ordinance to fit the branding. And we actually appointed a couple of city council members to that subcommittees, Joni and Buzzy. Emily, are you sure you don't want to? Okay.
She said no.
Is anybody interested in that type of a discussion where we talk more about?
You guys have
be on
already
that.
made me feel bad, so I don't have to.
Is that appealing to anybody to have that discussion in more detail? And it wouldn't just be signage, it'd be more about visioning and, talking maybe even logos and color schemes, those types of things that may be associated with more of a signage master plan.
I don't want to take away anyone else's.
Buzzy and
opportunity.
I never
would
get
do it.
agree on anything. so
Heather wants to
probably
do
won't
it.
get Anything done.
I'll do it if no one else.
Oh, hey.
Okay.
will.
Yeah.
I'll do it. I'll be an alternate to her.
Okay.
Okay.
If you need an opinion, you can call me.
And
Jeff,
Jeff really.
I know
wants-
your
wants to
opinion.
Be the third alternate.
So, okay,
Okay,
I'll vote for the post.
anything else?
that's it. Thank you, guys.
All right,
Oh,
so
we
next
could-
meeting, oh, Dwight, yes, I'm sorry, Dwight.
I know, Scott, you haven't had a chance to talk to Alan yet, but does the city intend to apply for a community development block grant?
Yeah, so Commissioner Whitaker and I had the opportunity to sit in a very long, hot, stuffy meeting this afternoon about how to apply for Community Development Block Grant, CDBG grants. So those types of grants come down from HUD at the federal level. They're distributed through the state to local areas such as Cache Valley, Cache County. So BRAG, Bear River Association of Governments, is it's called the Council of Governments. So it's a multi-county organization that oversees some of these grants. So as it's passed down from the Fed down to the state, down to our local level, there's about $700,000 worth of grant funding available through this program. There's a deadline in January that we would have to submit projects for those funds. These funds are primarily intended to improve the quality of living for moderate to low income households. So we'd have to identify projects that would be eligible, and I believe Alan has a few items that we may be able to apply for. But it's very specific. So some of the more affluent areas probably wouldn't be eligible, but we will put some pen to paper and see if we can grab some of those funds for some projects. But that's a process that we'll be going through over the next couple of months. We may not have additional discussion with this body, but we do have to have a public hearing. We'll probably do that with the city council, and we'll see where it goes. See if we can get any funds.
Scott, is that 700,000? Is that to North Logan City or is that just for the whole area?
It's from multiple counties, so it's Cache County, Box Elder, and I believe Rich in that council of government. So it's not very much butter to spread on a large piece of toast, but we'll see what we can do.
Good, thank you. Thanks, Dwight, for doing that too. Anything else?
I move we adjourn.
Oh, I need a motion. Okay, Heron made the motion to adjourn and Jeff seconded it. So we're adjourned. Thank you. Oh, we didn't vote on it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.